Hello everybody and welcome back to another Ahrefs Studios tutorial. Now today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting it up to where we can interact with our items. So if I open up this chest right here, what's going to happen is it's going to allow us to be able to see both our character and of course our inventory. Now, actually, let me go ahead and adjust it just a tad bit more so we can actually visibly see a little bit better, I think. There we go. Okay, so basically what we have here is, say for instance, we want to be able to swap out our items, right? So all I want to do is simply right-click this item inside of this inventory and it allows us to be able to swap out these items like so. Then we can do that with any item in any position and it works. We also want to make it to where, say for instance, we have like an apple, right? Or normal items, things like potions, things that are stackable, right? And if we decide to right click these things, it allows us to be able to use those items and we can customize what each individual item is going to do. So that's going to be very, very handy. I also made it to where, say for instance, if we're out here and we have our inventory full and we right click inside of our equipment slot, it will drop the item and it will allow us to be able to do stuff like that. So let's go ahead and pick that up, throw those back on there, and boom, bada bing, bada bang. All right, guys, so that's all we got going on right there. So let's get started into how it actually all works. Now, there's only going to be 4 scripts that we're going to be working on today, but make sure that you follow along very, very closely because I ran into a duplication glitch whenever I was programming this. So yes, make sure that you put in exactly what I put in, otherwise you may run into that issue. All right, so inside of your item class, this was a class we created quite a bit ago. We're going to create this public virtual void called use. Now, virtual voids are really, really useful functions because we can override these functions inside of a subclass and allow us to be able to customize whatever they do. Now, currently we just have this put inside of the item as a debug. We can remove this at any time, but this is just simply saying that we can use the item, okay? We go over to our equipment script, and inside the equipment script, all we're going to be doing is creating a public override void called use, and we don't really want to use the equipment, right? Because we're going to be wanting to swap these items around inside of our inventory slot and our equipment slot. There's no real reason to be able to put the code inside here as to what we use it for, right? So we're not going to even worry about that. Let's go over to our inventory slot now. Now, the inventory slot, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be doing here. So we have this input.get button down fire to, which basically means we're right clicking. And this, of course, is put down inside of our on pointer down public void. This is basically part of the iPointer interface that we are using, okay? Inside here, we're basically going to ask a question. So we want to first make sure that our data.item, which of course is the data or item data item inside of this slot, we want to make sure that it's equal to null. If it is equal to null, then we're going to return, which means that none of the rest of this script is going to run and we don't have to worry about any sort of issues. If that's not true, then we're going to get the inventory related to this slot. So we're going to get the item data. We're going to set it as an array, and we're going to call this the parent inventory. We're going to make it equal to get component and parent dynamic inventory display, inventory holder, inventory, and then items. Next, we want to say, all right, so is the item an equipment, right? So we say if data.item is equipment. Very, very simple, right? If so, we're going to create a cast by saying equipment, or creating an equipment variable called equipment, and casting it and as our data.item, like so. Then from there, we're going to say use the equipment. Now this is a void that we created, so just go ahead and type it in, right squiggly lines, yep, it's gonna appear. And we're just going to plug in our equipment value, which is here, our parent inventory, which is here, and then for our character owner, we're going to get it from our game manager.instance.player.equip.display.owner, like so. If that's not true, so we're going to say else, we're going to use the item and then plug in our parent inventory, like so. So once you got that done, we're going to roll down to our use item function. Now, this use item function is very, very, very simple. So it's going to require an array of item data. It's called parent inventory. And we're going to basically say we're going to use the item. So we're going to say data.item use. We're also going to remove from the stack. So we're going to say data.stack minus minus. And whenever you use like a minus minus or plus plus on an integer value, it will increment it by one value. So we're going to be removing one item from that stack. Then we're going to on update slot display and plug in our data. Then we have to ask the question, right? So if our data is less than or equal to 0, or our stack value is less than or equal to 0. If that's true, then we're going to clear the slot first off, which basically sets the slot equal to null. We're going to then set the parent's inventory. So basically whatever inventory that we're equipped with, we're going to set that value equal to the current data, which is equal to null. And then it's going to get what index it's at, which of course is this current index. Next, we're just going to then call the on update slot display, plug in our data, which will then update the display one more time, which technically this right here is going to update the display anyway, but this is just a backup just in case you have any form of overhead complications. So that's just there. Now, before we actually get into the use equipment function, we're going to actually talk about these two little functions down here. So at the bottom, well, let's actually start with this private integer called getEquipTypeIndex, which requires an equipment type called type. Okay, so inside here, we're going to run a switch, and we're going to be plugging in our types. And from there, we're going to get all of our cases. Now, keep in mind, when I say this, because it's very, very important, with the equipment types, you need to make sure that you have one for each equipment type value. So if you do have a equipment type for your hand, I guess, or you have an equipment type as a ring or a necklace or whatever, make sure that you add these inside here. That's very, very important. I've said it before in previous tutorials, very important. So this returns as an integer value, so we're going to be returning, if it's a head, we're going to return as 0. If it's a body, we're going to return as 1. Pants, return as 2. Feet, return as 3. Default, we're not going to do anything. And then if we get the equipment type index and none of this works, then we're going to return as a -1. But I would advise putting a debug.log error down here. That way it will prevent it from running, and then you can fix the problem as well. So that's just my advice to you. I know I won't have that issue because, you know, I set it up. But yeah, if I were you, I would put that debug.log error there just to be on the safe side, to make sure that you do not forget to put in any numbers. Okay, and then of course we have a private void called getEquipSlot and update, right? So this is going to require an int called index. And from here, we're going to basically get our equipment slot. So we're going to create a equipment slot variable called slot. And from here, we're just going to grab our GameManager.InstancePlayerEquipDisplay.Transform.getChild. We're going to plug in the index.getComponentEquipmentSlot. If that slot is equal to null, we're going to return, which means that there's no slots that are built up. So we're going to return and nothing's going to happen. Otherwise, we're going to set slot.onUpdateSlotDisplay data, like so. All right, so now since we got all those out of the way, time for the most complicated script in the world. I know there's a lot to do here, but we got to do it. All right, so inside here, we're going to create this private void called useEquipment, and inside that, it's going to require a couple of variables. So we need an equipment. We're going to call that equipment. We're going to need an item data array. So we're going to create that as parent's inventory. And you can write these variables the way that you want to write them, but just make sure that whenever you write them inside the script that they're going to actually be that way. And of course, we have our character called owner. Okay, so the first thing that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to set the equipment type to an int value. So we're going to create an int called EquipedIndex. And this is going to be equal to our get equip type index. And then we're going to plug in this equipment dot type. From there, we have to ask a question. We're going to say, does an item exist in the equipment slot, right? So this is the function which basically says it does, right? So there is an equipment inside of our equipment slot. So the question we would ask is, if our owner.data.equipment, we're going to get the array of that equipment, and we're going to plug in our int value of equipped index. If it's not equal to null, which means that there is an item inside of that slot. From there, we're going to create a temp data for this slot and for the equipment slot as well. So we're going to create an item data called temp copy data, which is equal to the current data that's on this slot. We're also going to create an item data called previous equipped data, which means that this is the item data that is on the equipped slot. Then from there, we're going to make that equal to a new item data. So we're basically going to set it equal to null. Then we're going to set the data. So we're going to say previous equipped data.item is equal to the owner.data.equipment. We're going to get the index like so. Then we're going to set the value, or how much is the stack. Now, as I said before, equipment should always equal 1, which means that we can't really stack equipment. So we're going to make sure that our previous equipment data.stack is equal to 1. And you can see I put this default, just a little note there for myself. But basically, yeah, you always just want to default equipment to 1, no matter where you put it, okay? All right, so then we're going to set the equip slot. So we're going to say owner.update equipment data. We're going to then cast as an equipment type, put in our temp copy data dot item, and then we're going to put in our index, which is our equipped index. Then we're going to get our equipped slot and update, which is the function that we created down below. And we're going to plug in our get equipped type index and plug in our equipment type dot type. And technically, we could just plug in our equipped index right here. I don't know why I didn't put that there. Oh, it's probably, yeah, I know why. Okay, so yes. Once we plug this in, let me actually go and switch that out real fast. Just plug in that value there. Oh, right here. What am I doing? Okay, yeah, we're going to just plug this in here. Okay, so yeah, once we get this equipment slot and update, we're just going to plug in our equipped index, and everything's going to work out great. Let me go ahead and press save there, just for the heck of it. Okay, then what we want to be able to do is set this slot. So to do that, we're going to grab the parent's inventory.setValue. So this is where we're accessing the inventory system, and we're going to then set its value equal to the previous equipped data. So the slot that we're trying to swap with, and we're also going to set it by its R index, right? Then we're going to on update slot display, which is of course this slot, and we're going to plug in the previous equipped data. Lastly, we're going to set our game manager.instance.cursor tooltip, and we're going to set display tooltip equal to our current data. So data.item.name, data.item.description, and data.item.value, like so. And this allows us to be able to update, and I should write down update cursor tooltip. Okay, so that is all we have to do if we want it to say it does contain an item. If it does not contain an item, right? So if our equipment slot does not have an item inside it, then we do something that's super easy. So we need to set the equipped slot. So we're going to say owner.update equipment data. We're going to put in our cast value of equipment for our data.item. And then we're going to put in our equipped index, like so. The next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to get the equipped slot and update, and we just need to put in our equipped index, like so. Then from there, we're going to clear this slot, and we're going to remove it from the inventory. So we're going to say parents inventory set value new item data, and we're going to then put in our transform.getSibling index, which of course is our current slot index. Lastly, we want to be able to hide the tooltip because there's nothing left inside this slot. So we're going to say GameManager.instance cursor tooltip.hide tooltip. And that's all you got to do. I know, super complicated, but it's pretty easy once you get it done. All right, so the last script that we got to do is the equipment slot. So if we go over to the equipment slot, this one's not as complicated as the last one. So you shouldn't. It shouldn't be as big of an issue. So we're going to, of course, do if we press the right mouse button down, right? Then we have to ask the question. We're going to say if the data.item is equal to null, return, which means we don't have any items inside this slot, which is fine. And then from there, we're going to get our parents inventory. So we're going to create an item data array called parents inventory, which is equal to our get component in parent equipment display.equip parent. We also want to get the owner or the character owner. So we're going to say character owner is equal to get component in parent equipment display.owner. So we want to be able to try to add to the inventory. So we're going to ask this question. We're going to say if our game manager.instance.player inventory display.inventory holder.add item, and we're going to be plugging in our data. If we can add the item, we're going to then say clear this slot, which means that we're going to be emptying this slot. We're going to set the value of our parent inventory, which of course was set to our equipment display. And we're going to set it by setting our data and of course our current index, right? Then we're going to set or update the owner's equipment, right? So we're going to say owner.update equipment data. We're going to cast as our equipment type for our data.item and then plug in our current index like so. Then we need to be able to update the cursor tooltip. So we're going to say if our data.item is not equal to null, we're going to set our game manager.instance cursor tooltip update slot, plug in our data, set in our parents inventory, and also get our current index. Otherwise, we're going to say game manager.instance cursor tooltip.hide tooltip. Okay, so if we can't add the item, we're just going to drop the item. So we're going to put in game manager.instance player inventory display inventory holder.drop item, plug in our data, clear this slot out. Then we're going to update the equipment data. So owner.update equipment data, cast as our equipment type, data.item, put in our current index, which is our transform.getSibling index. And then we're going to close the cursor tooltip. So game manager.instance cursor tooltip hide.tooltip. I know, very complicated, yes. And of course that is also underneath our on pointer down event as well on our equipment slot. Okay, so let's head back over into Unity, and it's probably gonna have to compile because I did do some adjustments there, but it's no biggie. Now, like I said, just make sure that whenever you set up your script, it's going to be exactly the same as how I have my script set up. Otherwise, you can run into some complications that aren't really the best thing inside the world. But I digress, so. Okay, so we're going to get back into the play mode. To be able to actually just take a look at what we got going on. So, same thing as before, we can right click to be able to take it off, and of course we could right click to put it on. And these things work in practically any setup as well. So say for instance, if I decide to close out my inventory, which it's taking a second, and say for instance I walk over here, actually yeah, we'll have to do it from here probably. So yeah, if I decide to put my inventory over here, and say for instance I decide to equip this right here, I can then swap it out with an item instead of a chest, and we won't have any issues as well. Now keep in mind though that if we decide to right click from here, it's always going to go over to the player inventory and not over to this right here. And we can put in the code to be able to fix that as well, but I'm not really too interested inside that, to be honest. But if you guys are, make sure to leave those in the comment section below, and I'll make a tutorial for that. That way, I can satisfy you guys the best I can. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so that's about it for today. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos. If you have any questions regarding this or any of my other tutorials, make sure to leave those in the comment section below. If there's any form of tutorial you guys want me to cover, make sure to also leave those below as well. If there's a game that you're making and you want to be able to share it, I would love to watch those as well. Alright guys, I'll see you guys later. Bye.